forget. I don't know his name. Do you know his name?
I don't remember. I remember Margot, but
Yeah.
because of the EAUX.
Margot's a nice name. Agree to disagree. Good evening or afternoon, depending on when this show shows. This is Agree to Disagree. My name is Don McKinnon.
Dick Schavo here. Nice to be with you this evening.
And we're going to start off with, I would like to start off with the three senatorial candidates, 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And I will start it off by saying that, and maybe you've got the Herald. I don't get the Herald. I get every other paper but the Herald. The Boston Globe has endorsed a fellow named Markey, who's a Democrat, and then they've endorsed a fellow named Winslow, the Republican candidate, which surprises me a little bit. I don't know enough about it, so it shouldn't surprise me, but I'm easily surprised, and I'm surprised at that. I rather thought they would endorse Michael Sullivan, who is, I think, a more local track record over the period of years. He was a rep and district attorney or attorney general or something. You know him better than I do, Sullivan. Were you surprised? It was just today, by the way, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, today
Yep.
Probably. Winslow. Do you get the Herald?
Yes, I do.
Did they endorse anybody?
I'm not sure they've taken a position on Markey versus Lynch, but I'm not surprised that the Globe picked Markey.
Oh, no.
there's
We
no
would not be.
surprise.
No, that would be surprised if they didn't.
Right, yeah. I
pick
mean,
Markey.
that was
And
pretty
the
much-
irony of the situation is that Lynch is from Boston. It's the Boston Globe.
Right.
Lynch is from Boston.
Well, it just tells you that
We know.
that Mr. Markey is very much tied in with the political
The
establishment.
liberal establishment. I
Yeah.
have to watch what I say because
Yeah.
I'm going
You
to
is
be
one.
defending him in another 3 or 4 weeks probably because
Yeah.
he'll survive, and
Yeah.
certainly can't be for any one of these 3 candidates.
Well,
over
I
here.
would characterize Mr. Markey more as a political, he's
Well,
really,
he's certainly been around longer than most people you
Right.
know in your lifetime.
yeah, and he's more wide with the political establishment, whether or not it's
Has
civil
to
or
be.
not.
Look at
Yeah.
his endorsements.
Yeah.
And
Well-
most of his money, I think, is from out of state.
He had he recently raised in an article today $4.8 million in his Senate bid, and
see.
here's the thing that really stands out in my mind. He had $3 million in his congressional campaign account at the start of the race, and he now has a total of $7.8 million on hand, but 53% of this last tranche of money came from out of state.
Yeah, well,
And-
that's what we were saying. Most
Yeah.
of his money comes from out of
Yeah.
state.
And to me, that's a negative thing for us in Massachusetts, personally.
Well,
I mean, if people from out of
yeah, I
state
know.
are supporting him,
No, I hear you.
I mean, this is a state, this is an election
Yeah.
of the Commonwealth. It should be Commonwealth people.
But our senator always has national impact, and so therefore national people care. The people from California, they care about everything. In the meantime, their state's bankrupt. So it's good to see people who are broke.
But
in real
it
life.
speaks to the fact that when more than half of his money that is raised comes from out of the Commonwealth, it speaks to the fact that this is a person who's really political as opposed to, a local, homegrown, involved in our issues as I believe
Right.
Mr. Lynch is.
Right.
Now, Mr. Lynch has got, according to this article, he has about $1.5 million, of which he's already spent a fair amount. I think he's got a balance of $500,000 left
That's
in his
what
account.
it says. I've got numbers here, Dick. It says Stephen Lynch has $514,000 net and cash on hand.
yeah.
And Edward Markey, they say, have 4.6. You got 8. That's probably right.
Yeah, well, he had 8, and he's leaving in his account 4.6. So that's a very, very stark. It's a contrast. I mean, it's like a 10-to-1, and it's another brick in Steve Lynch's backpack, so to speak.
For you and I.
Yeah.
But what do we know, right?
Well, I mean, money talks when you're campaigning the ads.
That's what they're very definite. I think his ads are good, Lynch's. Again, I push to the fact, and no one's mentioned it, that he's connected to his constituents more than Markey is. I
Yep,
think
absolutely.
Markey is more
Absolutely.
the big picture, When they get, I like John Kerry. I mean, I was with him when he was lieutenant governor. I remember at the convention walking around politicking for lieutenant governor. So, I mean, he's been around forever, John Kerry. But he's more statesman. That's how he got this job. He's more worldly than Massachusetts. I don't think he knows much about Massachusetts.
I was having trouble disagreeing with you up until this last comment. But, you know, if you're not supporting or for Mr. Markey, then it's hard to understand how you would feel differently about Mr. Kerry, because neither one of them, as far as I can tell, is really connected with the grassroots. They're above it. They're out there. They spend little time in this state, if any. Well, of course, now Senator Kerry, who's now, you know, the Secretary of State, obviously doesn't have a reason to spend time here. But when he was senator, I mean, you know.
I think his wife comes from Pennsylvania or someplace. I don't know where she comes from.
The closest I think he got to really representing this state was when he had his
Boise, Idaho. I think she's from Boise, Idaho.
I mean, so and I think Mr. Markey and Mr. Kerry kind of share that remoteness from the Commonwealth.
My possible disagreement with you on that is that I hear that Lynch doesn't spend much time in Massachusetts. I mean, that's a given. I know that's what they say.
Really?
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure because he's not my rep. I've never had a dealing with him. I know we've had a dealing with him where he didn't get back to us, but then again, he doesn't. I always figure most of the reps really live back to back to each other. When they have cookouts, they just look over the fence, and they all come from Boston anyway. So, you know, it tweedles on down and it gets down to us. But I'm not that sure that Lynch is of John Kerry's cut. As a matter of fact, they said when when Markey first got in, he was very aggressive. He was, the new breed and tell it like it is and all. And then he fell into the groove, as they say. So I'm not that sure about Markey, that where he isn't my rep. I don't know. If he wins, I'm gonna talk to people in his district to find out what kind of a rep is he in, because I know that Lynch is good in his district. I know that.
Well, I mean, we certainly know he's been to Raynham a number of times.
Yeah, I'm 100% for Lynch. There's no doubt about that.
Now, on the other side of it, so we're not really disagreeing too much on that.
No, but let's
get
down to the Republican side, because there's three guys here that nobody knows.
Before we get to the Republican side, one last comment about Steve Lynch, and that is the word that I've received is that in the debates with Mr. Markey, he hasn't done that well. Have you got that same?
I think he's done okay, because I think the difference is that Markey has a lead of such note that I think he's playing gentleman. So therefore, he comes across stately. And in the debate that they had, the one that I saw, he actually gave Stephen Lynch what they call a softball. He gave him a nice, easy question, And Lynch was quite honestly taken back by it. Lynch has to be more the aggressor, I know that. I don't think Lynch loses these debates, but I think by not winning them, he loses.
Yeah. Well,
that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And the impression is he really hasn't, counteracted his from behind position in the debates, which is not a good thing. It doesn't bode well for him.
I'm going to be very I don't want to say negative about my own candidate, so I'll say Lynch is going to do it. He's going to pull this thing out. Positive thinking. That's important. But our three guys running, I haven't seen them in an individual debate, but let me give you their numbers. Winslow, who's got the endorsement of the Globe, has $142,000. Sullivan has $96,000, and it says Gabriel Gomez has $500,000. So I think maybe Gomez has put money into his own campaign now. Where do you get $500,000 when you come from the Cape and no one knows your name?
Well, one thing I wasn't, I hadn't seen that set of numbers, that recent
that's
set
today,
of numbers.
And that's how much cash they say they have.
But I'll tell you one thing, in just the casual catching the ads on the TV, it's clear that Mr. Gomez has had more ads, at least from the random.
Well, it
you know,
looks like
viewing.
he's got more money.
He's got more money, and his ads are out there. I don't
Yeah.
see the ads from the other two candidates, to be honest with you. But on the other hand, Gabriel Gomez really needs those ads because he's certainly the least.
He's
of the,
coming from behind if he
way,
does it.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
coming from way behind,
Yeah.
and I think he has an uphill battle. He's got a good story in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He started off way behind the 8 ball as far as, you know, and the other two
And
candidates.
he had a letter to the governor
yeah,
saying,
and that has
I
been
think,
a-
I think the president's really quite a guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, in this state, you know, maybe that plays well with the moderates. I don't know.
It played well with the governor,
Yeah.
but not good enough because he said the guy that took my application and said, I'll take this into the governor, is the guy that is now the senator.
Yep.
So he said that it's a little disheartening when the guy that takes your letter is the guy that's going to be the senator. So,
Well, I mean, it's definitely been a negative for his campaign because that's been the primary argument that his contestants felt.
Yeah.
That's been their main argument. That, you know, who is this guy? Is he a sheep's and wolf's clothing or whatever? A wolf in sheep's clothing, I should say.
Republicans, I feel,
Or is he? What do they
are
call
are more structured to being on the side of Republicans. They don't like it. Democrats, you know, who I have no use for, of course, Ray Flynn, but I'm a Democrat, but I'm for Willie Lump Lump, who's a Republican, you know. Democrats live with that a little better, though. I mean, you know, I take exception to it, but most Democrats say, that's okay, Ray, have a good day, and, you know,
Well, I think.
hold the umbrella for the
Well,
vote.
I think that.
But
kind-
Republicans take offense.
But I think that kind of attitude is similar to the one you described with Markey. When you're in control, as they clearly are, the Democrats in this state, it's easy to be a little bit more above the fray. You can be a little bit more relaxed
Yes.
when you own the game.
That's right.
So, I mean,
As did young Kennedy.
I think if the Republicans had the kind of majority in this state that the Democrats do, they could be a little more relaxed about the situation too.
Yeah.
But in any event, back to the Republican candidates, it's hard to
Are
believe.
you still with Gomez? You were.
Well, I like you
Yeah,
know, a
I
lot
knew
of
you
what
were.
he, you know, I like his background. I like the fact.
Oh yeah, you can't
he's-
you can't argue the paper.
You know, I mean, I like the fact that he doesn't have a political background.
Yeah.
He's a successful business person. He's a person who has served the country in a way which nobody, I think, on record has ever served the country, and that is both a SEAL and a Navy pilot.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
incredible. So he's an accomplished person.
He was
He's
going to
a-
run the marathon. I don't know whether he did.
Well, he
He
was
was going
supposed
to.
Yeah, I don't know if he did or
I
not.
don't know if he did or not.
But equally, he's a person who comes from an Hispanic background. His family
Yes,
come, I believe,
yes.
from Colombia,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
Someplace
And so it's
other than, you know, South Boston.
no, he was actually born in South America, and so it's an incredible success
He is
story.
a great story.
Yeah. So, but let's face it.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, he's not a brand.
he tends to make mistakes.
Well, I mean, he's just not
But
that well known.
I will take a little issue with this on your stand of he has no political experience, therefore he should be a good politician. Politics, and I'll agree with you on this, politics is one of the few businesses that a guy wears it like a badge that he has no experience. Try going into industry and say, do you know what? I want this job, but I have absolutely no experience in doing this job. And they say, thank you very much, but
Well, you make a point. I'm not going to disagree with you on that point. There's a learning curve to politics, just as there is a learning curve to industry and every other field of endeavor. So there's no question. But you know, the other side of that is, if I can balance that argument, he brings a fresh perspective.
Oh, I'm not saying, no. As a matter of fact, even, you know, the old argument against Ted Kennedy, who now is, some say, politically was the top of the Kennedy brothers, had no experience at all. The old argument was if your name was Edward Moore rather than Edward Moore Kennedy, would you get any votes? And the answer was you wouldn't get it if it was Edward Moore, but since it's Edward Moore Kennedy, you got elected. So yeah, there are people who come in with no experience whatsoever. It's true.
Yeah.
And-
Well, but that's a great example of the challenge that Mr. Gomez has. He's a fresh, he's got a fresh background,
Right.
but he's not a brand like the Kennedy brand is.
Right.
So the new Kennedy, the third, can walk in, take over without
Seems
any
like he
experience.
has, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know what? He's got a lot of people running interference for
Yeah.
him.
Well,
When you get up to that
part
level,
of it is to hire the right people.
when
in
you
the
get up
right
to
place.
that level, you get
Yeah.
a lot of people that make you look smart. But anyway,
So we'll see which, we're getting closer to it, aren't we, though?
I
A
think
couple
it's
of weeks
gonna
from
be-
now, we're going to be probably just the week of the election or in around there.
it's the 20th, is it?
Somewhere
I-
I've got
I
it.
can't-
But anyway, we're in around the next election. I think we may be on
No, it's the
the
30th.
Monday
I'm sorry.
before.
It's the 30th, April 30th. I believe it's April 30th. I hope I'm right.
Oh,
That-
wow. Hey, wait a minute now. Having said that, this is the last show that we will work prior to the election
Right.
for the Senate.
So I'll make my prediction
Okay.
at the next show. We know it's going to be Markey versus.
I think it's going to
Versus
be, well, it's possible Markey, although I'm full Lynch, which
Oh, I
keeps
think
me
it will be.
consistent with the way I do
Yeah.
things. Gee, I don't know.
I think it'll be Markley and Winslow.
Okay, well, that's
Wi-
the Globe was picking them in a way,
Well,
didn't
I
they?
mean,
See, Winslow has a little bit of identification for the Republicans.
Yeah.
The Republicans have a wonderful history, though, of getting even with Republicans. When they get even, they get angry. I mean, I go all the way back to John Kennedy when he won the Senate.
Yeah.
The Lodge went for Eisenhower, and the conservative Republicans. I forget who they were for, but it was a conservative that they were for, and it wasn't Eisenhower, because they weren't sure Eisenhower was a real Republican because he came out
Well,
of the service.
I was old enough when Kennedy was president. I was still in college, but but to tell you that, I think the agenda, the platform that Democrats had in the day of John Kennedy is quite a bit different than the agenda that we see in today's
entirely different
Democratic
world.
Party. Yeah,
Entirely different
it's a
world. Yeah.
totally different
Yeah.
Democratic Party, and John Kennedy was a Democrat, but he also had a great understanding of what made this country work, and he supported a lot of the traditional values.
By today's standard, he would be an
absolutely.
ultra-conservative.
By today's standard, he would definitely be a conservative.
He would have to be for Lynch.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so that's
Okay, so we've made our prediction. We've
You're going to
had
pick
our
Winslow
last.
too. You're picking Winslow for the.
I'm going along with you because you're the expert
Yeah, but
on
geez, this is-
Republicans. Some of your best friends are Republicans.
This is scary that you're going along with me. I don't like
Well,
this.
because Sullivan would be my pick
Yeah.
because of the knowledge of Sullivan that
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
But I'm not a Republican.
Yeah.
I would say Sullivan's better known than the other two, but Winslow may be better known. See, I am left with the belief it is more difficult to win a primary than it is to win an election.
Interesting.
That's
Interesting.
I've lived with that
Yep.
because I've seen people that are very good not survive the primary election, which in this case maybe Gomez is the best.
Yeah.
Might
I think
be.
he's got an uphill fight.
And I think Lynch is the best. And now I'm looking and I'm saying the guy on my side who's going to win is the guy who's not my candidate again. Well, anyway.
Okay, we'll know the next.
Who would you prefer though? Now that you've said Winslow's going to win, you would prefer Lynch on the Democratic side. Who would you prefer on the Republican side?
Oh, I prefer Gomez.
Okay,
I would.
so go.
Yeah.
So
But now here's the tough one for me.
okay.
I prefer Gomez on the Republican side, but as regards Lynch versus Gomez, that's a tough pick. That's a
But
very
Lynch
tough pick.
Lynch versus Winslow.
Easy, Lynch.
Is that right?
Easy.
Isn't that something?
Easy. I'd pick Lynch. But Lynch versus Gomez, that'd be a tough one for me.
Ah.
But because you know from
Well,
previous,
because
I like Lynch.
you've listened to
He's-
Gomez and you've
I like
you're
Gomez.
impressed with him. Yeah.
But I have to tell you, I'm very impressed with Steve Lynch. I really mean that.
Yeah,
And
I know what you've said this all along.
Yeah, I really
You've
mean
been
that.
upfront about it.
Yeah, I think he's got
Yeah.
a lot going for him. Okay, so the next
Okay,
subject,
now we're going into it.
a tough one.
The devastating one, yes. You want to lead off on it? Because we don't agree to disagree on this one, I don't think.
Oh, we may.
We may, okay.
We're,
Well,
we're talking about the Boston bombing, the
Yes.
horrendous,
This
horrific
is what we're going to
tragedy.
talk about. And we
Just
again, our prayers are for the families of
horrific.
those who have been adversely affected and not only deceased, but those who are maimed, lost
I mean,
limbs.
nearly 200 people injured,
Yeah.
3 or 4, I guess 4 people now dead with the police officer the other night. But there was an article in the paper, was it today or yesterday? I think it was today. One of the people, it was a lady featured, who they had a very big picture of her, and she had lost one of her legs, and she's a dance instructor.
Oh.
Now, how tragic.
Well, the
how
two brothers
incredibly tragic.
were roofers that have lost, both brothers have lost
Yep. Right.
legs.
So
And,
the tragedy
they're
is
roofers.
it's just incredible. And imagine, I mean, that just is such a symbol of how I mean, everybody's injury was tragic.
And especially when children are victims. I used to speak to groups that, on days of military, I used to have a talk about what if, and one of them was Joe Kennedy Jr., what if? And then there was a what if ships hadn't been going by when George Bush the Elder bailed out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and John Kennedy's boat was sunk in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So there's two guys that could have not made it. So the life and death game that occurs. But when it's children, that 8-year-old boy, it's just unacceptable.
Well, but here's a couple of words that we ought to kick around a little bit, because there may be some disagreement in this. The incidents that you just described, like the incident in Texas, which you may talk about later.
And we will maybe get to
those
that.
incidents are, in my mind, best described a term tragic. And I've heard no less than the President of the United States refer to this bombing as tragic. And I just have to say, I don't think that's the right term to
Not the
describe
right
it.
word, okay.
No, I think it's a terrorist situation through and through. And I know there are a lot of people that say we need more information. That's great, but there's enough related to terrorist activity to be able to classify this. This is a terrorist situation, in my view, and I don't think it should be characterized as just another tragedy. This is another example of the war that we are engaged in with terrorists around the world. We are a target. We're a soft target for these people. And these two brothers were radicalized. There's evidence of that. And I just have to feel that this government needs to take a stronger, direct position. And I know that eventually they may, as information unfolds. But I just don't think we ought to water this down as just another tragedy.
I don't
How do you
think
feel about
well,
that?
I don't think they did, though. I take issue with the fact that how serious they took it. And we may get to the Texas situation, but in the Texas situation, you have more fatalities. Percentage-wise, you have more people who were killed by virtue of, and it is and was a terrible, terrible thing. Destroyed 3 schools, but you can see that the way the president, let's just say the president because you brought him into it, is treating it on 2 different levels, really. The one in Boston definitely is considered nationally more significant to the overall picture than what about Texas? My
Well,
goodness.
I mean, but they're apples
But
and
see, well,
oranges.
yes, they are
were-
apples and oranges, because
mean,
the one in Texas
is-
was an operation that something went wrong in the manufacturing of something. The one in Boston, you're right, was to all intents and purposes.
It was premeditated.
It was premeditated.
Well, but here's the thing. Now, the head of the Boston police is just, I think, as early as or as late as yesterday, I should say, has indicated that there is ample evidence that they intended
to do more.
to do more damage.
Yeah.
They had so much more explosive material
Yeah.
that if they had not been caught, they intended to continue on this rampage. So, this is terrorist activity. And, now let's talk about the fact that the reason that they were caught was because of the incredible amount of surveillance information, not just structured surveillance information, but the smartphones, the cell phones, the videos that people take.
It's a different era, isn't it?
Yeah.
If this were 1940, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about the solution, which is the 2 perpetrators,
Yeah.
because we'd still be wondering who did that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the pictures, somebody south of us here, I've forgotten whether it was Dighton or one of the communities.
Somebody
south.
from Taunton took a picture that was like
maybe it was Taunton.
Yes, a
Yep.
young man from
Yeah.
Taunton.
And the picture of them was like a photograph. It was like
Yep.
a portrait.
It was like they posed for it.
Yeah,
There they were,
incredible.
side by side.
What are the
The
odds?
best picture taken was
Yeah.
that young man. He sent it on to the FBI. Somebody else took a picture that when they first saw the bomb placed down next to the mail.
You know, but that wasn't as clear. The one that you're
No, but
talking
the
about from
point is
Taunton.
that they sent it to Channel 7
Yeah.
instead of sending it to the FBI. 7 sent it on
Yeah.
to the FBI.
But here's an issue that I'd like to bring to the fore. Now there are those that are now saying that we need much more surveillance equipment. You know, government surveillance
I don't know how you
equipment.
can have more surveillance.
Oh well. Oh,
Right now, we're, even us.
I mean, there can be many. I
Yeah.
forgot whether it's New York or Chicago. One of them has like 10,000 or just thousands of cameras.
New York has
Has the 10,000
the
cameras or
number
whatever.
one police department in the country.
Well, I
New
mean,
York.
so the issue is, should we, on the one hand, dramatically increase the number of video cameras that are out there, or is this a privacy freedom issue?
I've turned a little
There you go.
conservative on that because when I was a selectman, I did vote to have cameras at lights, not to penalize them by losing licenses and things like that, but pictures of the plates running red lights, and they were fined for it. And I was for up at the water tower, up at
Yeah, Central
Orchard
Water
Street.
Tower, yeah.
That camera is down there, and people take offense to that camera. It saves you a policeman down there, because if the camera wasn't showing down there, you want to find out who's doing it, put a policeman down there. So I have nothing against cameras all over the place. It doesn't mean anything to me. I think there has to be privacy to sanitary, locker rooms, things of this nature. There has to be some privacy, but because that's the nature of us, I believe.
Well,
but having said that, you have cameras everywhere.
It's interesting you say that, because I have very mixed emotions. I also was in favor. I went on record when we were talking about the possibility of a camera at a couple of the major intersections
Yes.
where there have been a lot
Elm
of
Street
accidents.
is a good
Elm
one,
Street
yeah.
and 138 is a classic.
And they love to take a left just after Carver Street. They just love it to
My
get into
pos-
McDonald's.
Yeah, my position was I don't like cameras, but I don't run red lights. So
I know.
You
That's
know.
a good one.
yeah. I mean, so that leaves me.
So it's not
but-
your problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's right. I mean, if you don't run red lights, why are you worried
Yeah,
about it?
What's your problem? Yeah.
So, but here's the other side of the coin, and putting it on a serious note.
Yeah.
I do believe there is a limit as far as the privacy issue. I feel that at some point, once you kick the door open, it just keeps, there's just more and more and
I
more.
know.
And the George Orwell,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
forgotten the name of it, that kind of a thing.
Big
Now,
Brother.
Big Brother, you know what I mean? Big Brother is if it isn't
Yeah.
here, it's darn close.
Yeah,
So I think we have to worry about that. Now, no matter how much video surveillance we use, I don't think we're ever really going to get a better handle on resolving or anticipating and deflecting these terrorist acts. There needs to be, and this is very contentious, but I will say it because I believe we need to take more definitive action profiling people that we know have a potential for being a problem. Now that's a huge issue amongst libertarians. It's a huge issue amongst many liberals.
I think it's
How
a
do you feel?
budget thing too, though, Dick, because what happens is, how much money does the FBI had? That gentleman who was 26, who was killed in a shootout, he was interviewed by the FBI. He was the Russians sent a note saying,
a lot of
"Watch
people
out for this
criticizing
guy."
the FBI for
I
that
know
right now.
I
That's
know
a big
I know that, but
contention.
it's second guessing, because how much money does the
Let me
FBI
address
have in the
that.
budget that they're going to interview everybody, every letter that
well,
was sent
I'm
from
gonna take-
Russia could really have us spinning our tail on that.
Well, I'm going to take a different point of view. I'm going to say that by not profiling, we waste a lot more money with our law enforcement trying to figure out who the bad person is by randomly looking. It was interesting. One of the
Yeah, but I don't think, Dick, that a letter from Russia saying, "Watch this guy," is profiling.
When I'm talking about a letter from Russia, I'm talking about profiling
Yeah,
people
but I'm saying the
who
fellow
are coming
that
in from
they're
Chechnya where
being
they.
criticized for not keeping their eye on this 26-year-old.
I'm past the Russian input. I'm talking about people who come in from countries which are heavily jihadists. They're fundamentalists. They come in, they go back there. I mean, we need to think more about profiling people.
This was a tough call, you must admit, because what this family did was they came in 10 years ago. Well, the young man was 9. The other young man was probably 14 or 15, 16 years old. But yet he did go back. And that Chesney, where he came from, argues, and the reason the Russians sent a note on him is Chesney attacks Russia. They do to Russia what we would consider 9/11.
Well, there's two fundamentalist groups there. One is anti-Russian, the other is, aggressive, militant Islamist, fundamentalists. But, the interesting thing is the older boy, who was supposedly Americanized and was a boxer and this and that, the last couple of years, people said, he started spouting on his web
and he went back to Russia.
Yeah, and he was talking very aggressively about this country and how we were against it. One of the newscasters interviewed a law enforcement security type from Israel, and of course nobody is potentially attacked more by
and no one's smarter at.
And why? You know what the answer was? The Israeli said, the difference between how you deal with this and how we deal with it is you look for bombs, we look at the people. There you go.
That's true.
You look, and El Al has their airline, the Israel National Airline, has never had a terrorist attack. You know why? Because if there's the slightest possibility that individual is problematic, is a problem, they're on that person. They're not looking
Israel is really very good at what they do.
I'm asking the question, why don't we spend more time profiling? I remember
I know.
My wife and I were at an airport. We were taking a plane on JetBlue, and those who have taken JetBlue know that you don't have seat reservations. You have, Group A, B, and C. We were the very first ones in the line, the very first, and we get pulled out of the line, and by the time they get through with us, we barely made the plane by a second or two. And I thought, there must be a smarter way of going about this than just picking randomly in people. Can't you do a little bit more homework?
Is that what they did? They randomly?
Oh yeah, that's their rule of that's their protocol, is to randomly check. So they'll pull an 89-year-old little old lady out of the line, and you get somebody over there that looks for all the world suspicious. It's just.
He doesn't get picked.
If we don't, and by the way,
love this country. I love this.
By the way, these two brothers, with their bombs and knapsacks.
I know.
Now, what are we going to do? Every kid from K to 12 carries a what do you call it? A knapsack or backpack. Every kid, I see them up and down the street.
And the hoodies, everybody. I wear a hoodie in the morning when I walk. It's cold, and I put the hood up.
If I ever see you with a backpack and a hoodie,
I have that. I do. I have one of each. I do have.
But I've made my point. I hope that there are enough people that feel strongly about we need to get a little more serious about checking the people and not the material.
I'll get a little involved in something which probably most people don't think about, but I do because of the fact that I was city and town. I've been in both. And I know that cities think that they're the big. I remember when Woburn, where I came from, thought Wilmington and Burlington were a bunch of hayseeds. Hey, they're coming down on the bus. They want to look at a 2-story building. There it is. There it goes, 2 stories. And there's no elevator, but they can go up the stairs to get to that sector. They don't have to go on they're okay. So, but here we are, and I pick on it just because, by the way, I always mispronounce his name, and you know that, but Menino, the mayor.
Menino.
Yeah. And Menino is the mayor of the city of Boston. And when the Foxborough football team wins the championship, they go to him. He can't even pronounce the name of the football players on there, but they refer to it as the Boston team.
Yeah.
It isn't the Boston. The Red Sox and the Celtics are the Boston teams.
That's New England.
But when this thing occurred, it did occur in Boston. And it was a Boston, and the poor fellow, they had to get him out of the hospital, put him in a wheelchair, and wheel him on down, which is fine. But nationally, they got it right, but locally, we didn't. And the channel I'm not picking on the channel because it's my favorite channel. Channel 5 is my favorite channel. I watch it. But there's something in their ego that whenever anything happens in Boston, Channel 5 will stay on the air from Channel 5 Boston. Whereas if you go to 6, I must say this, I don't like to say it because that's Providence, they go to the ABC national news. So my point is that there's some, and by the way, Channel 5 doesn't come from Boston. Channel 5 comes from Needham, but they call themselves the Boston Channel. And so, but Menino, is that
Menino.
Now it's time for him to go. I'll get his name.
You're just getting his name right.
Yeah, it's just time for him to go. Anyway, I like him. He's a good manager. I know people make fun of him, but they don't because they respect him. So I guess they say they just kid him a lot when they call him mumbles and things of that nature. But the whole action as of Thursday and Friday was Watertown, Mass. Now the national shows showed it that way. Watertown, Watertown, Watertown. Now I looked up Watertown because, of course, I know Watertown. You know, we all know Watertown. But I looked it up. We have a book that they send us. You know, the population of Watertown is 31,000. It's got a town manager, which means they're and they have a council. So they're very much like Bridgewater. Bridgewater's about 33 or 30, you know. So basically they're about the same. So you can see why the National wouldn't take heed to it, but the National did, because the police shootout was with the Watertown police. The boat that the man hid in was in Watertown, Mass, and he was confronted with Watertown police. Now, the Boston police did give them some, you know, service that a city can have that a town
So
can't.
your position is that 5 covered it from Boston's point of view, not Watertown's?
Well, my position is, if it were today and there was Lexington and Concord, they wouldn't be saying Lexington and Concord. They would say, Mayor John Hancock of Boston has the following report.
So
and then they would say they're out there in one of those towns. I'm just saying it's funny to watch cities versus town because, of course, Joe Kennedy is the classic example of that. I guess one of his latest pictures was that he's going to go to his towns. My wife said, what do you mean you're going to go to your towns? You represent those towns. You've never gone to those towns. It was like he was going to go to Istanbul, Turkey. He's going to visit those towns and see those people. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. So, but that's city versus town, and that's the way it is. But in the national news, though, they've been interviewing the chief of police from Watertown. They've been talking about the Watertown. Remember now, the Watertown police is probably about the same size as Bridgewater's police. So they probably have 30, 40, 50 guys. So it's interesting to watch the way it works.
Well, I guess I'll make a comment that somebody, not a news person, but I heard somebody say in just general discussion, and I'll use this as possibly a segue into our discussion on where we are with the gun laws and the gun control.
We don't know about them in guns yet. Stay tuned on that one.
Well, somebody made this comment, which I
guns.
thought was a bit over the top, but it's, as I said, I used it as a segue. The person said to me, well, I guess we should ask our national leadership to start a movement to ban bombs. Now, obviously, that's ludicrous.
Well, because they're homemade. They're made in the
well,
kitchen.
no, I mean, what it speaks to, what this person was trying to say, I guess, is look at, bombs kill people, we should ban them. Guns kill people, we should ban them. And if you carry the same line of thinking, cars kill people, we should ban them. And really, what it is it's people that kill people. It's these brothers that kill people, not their bombs. So it's obviously clearly ludicrous to say ban bombs. You can't.
Well,
but
the
you're not
shootout at the OK Corral with the boy 26, he stood out and decided it was like suicide by police is what he did. Because it was like
he had no choice.
There was 6 policemen.
Yeah,
he was in a vehicle. He could have tried to take off. As a matter of fact, the question will be down the road that the young man 19 has to face, the responsibility. And most recently they've started to work towards that, and it was said, this was said by a police officer from Watertown, I believe. He was alive, and then his brother ran over him.
I heard that.
I think he might have dragged him.
I don't think he knew that. He was just in a panic,
he killed his. There's a good chance that this guy killed his own
Oh
brother.
yeah, it's
Good
kind
chance
of
that he killed his own
it's
brother.
ironic, but
And you say about vehicles, he killed him with an automobile. If he killed him, he killed him with an automobile. He certainly didn't
he was
shoot
killed
him.
with. And actually, let's carry it one step further. He had multiple bullet wounds, and he actually had some shrapnel or some,
You mean the fellow 26?
the
So
26?
They
yeah,
both
the
were
20
shot, by
yeah,
the way. In
yeah,
this.
but he had some shrapnel
Yeah.
too. So this is a really interesting thing. He was killed by guns, bombs, and cars. All three.
That's right.
We don't know which one of them did the final thing, but anyway.
And I'm still trying to find out what he did for a living. You know, these people.
He was on some sort of disability, I think. Or,
Oh, was he really?
I don't think. I think he was on some sort of. I could be wrong.
They keep saying
but
he
he
was
didn't
a
have
boxer,
a job.
but the boxer
Yeah, that
was
failed
Golden
a long
Gloves.
time.
I mean,
well,
there's no
there's
money.
no money in Golden Gloves.
Well, no, there's no money.
and all of that
Yeah.
dissipated long ago.
Yeah, so I don't
think
know
he
what
was,
he did for a living.
I think they were on some sort of state aid of some kind. That's my impression.
That will
yeah.
come to
I
the
could be
fore.
wrong, and if I am,
And the other brother that was in college, of course, he was a
was
high
on-
school wrestler, and then he was, I believe, a sophomore,
Yeah.
not doing too well.
But isn't it rather incredible that after the bombing, the young brother who's alive right now
Yeah, went
went
right
back to school? And
well, because, you know,
it's just mind-boggling.
it's enough to make you say IQs don't make people smart. Because here was a guy who knows that everywhere there's a camera now. And I think when it shakes down, somebody writes a book from the FBI's point of view, I believe they had those pictures within a day, and they went the second day because they were trying to find out on their own before they came to the public and said, do you know this? I think they had the pictures, and I think they were looking all over the country trying to find who are these two people. But they couldn't solve it, so they went to the people, and the people did solve this case, by the way,
Well,
which is within a week. I mean, it's today, a week
you know,
today.
I was talking to somebody today about, we were chatting about this second brother, the younger brother, and the person seemed, at least my interpretation was somewhat sympathetic because, quote, the brother was brainwashed by the older brother, and so therefore there was, I mean, not that the person is innocent, but that we needed to have a little bit of sympathy, or I guess that would be my word.
I have no sympathy for any
and
of those
I'm
people.
thinking to myself, who cares if the person was brainwashed? The younger brother was brainwashed by the older brother. The older brother was brainwashed by the mother. The mother was brainwashed by the Inman. The Inman was brainwashed. I mean, so,
No.
I mean, to me, but there's a mindset out there, and this person certainly projected it, that, the poor kid, I mean, we know he's guilty, but he was brainwashed. Well, I don't even think that should enter into the discussion.
That's the card they play nowadays. I agree with you on that. They got a young lady that shot, stabbed, and slit her boyfriend's throat. Its trial's been on now for like 3 months. I just know it's going to end up in a mistrial, so it's going to be gone all over again. But they're trying to have mercy on her because in Arizona there's the death penalty, and they're trying to get her away from the death penalty, and they've done it so long, I think they're going to hang the jury and they have to have another trial. But the point is, I agree with you. You and I agree on this. Stop saying these people there's an excuse for doing what. There's no excuse for doing what.
I totally agree.
None.
I totally agree.
None.
Absolutely.
They murdered
They did what they
a
did.
child, a young lady, and a young lady from China whose parents.
And a
I
police
think it was
officer from MIT.
And a police officer from MIT who's just ready to go in the Somerville full time. Often these officers who are college policemen are on lists to get into the regular item.
But you and I are on absolutely the same page. Let's stop talking about excuses. This is it. That was a child was abused, and I don't know what the terminology, but guilty, but by reason of insanity. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
The crime was committed. There are a lot of children who grow up in dysfunctional homes that turn out to be very, very, very successful. So let's not. These excuses, they just are lame. You look at the act, look at the conduct, and treat it according to the crime that they committed, and stop making excuses for these people.
See, I have a funny feeling, of course, I'm against capital punishment, and one of the main reasons is that's the why that a lot of people don't.
I know
agree
why
with
you're
me
going
on.
to say it. I can hardly wait. Go ahead. Go ahead.
We are the only animal that hunts our own. All other animals hunt
Oh.
to live.
You're making this easy.
Well, because we kill one another, it is that they have to hire a man or woman to execute a person, and I believe that's something which is not natural to us. I don't think it's natural for us to kill each other. We kill each other in war. I understand that, and I'm okay with that. But in times of peace, and you'll say this one is war, and that's where I am. I'm in a bind. You got me in a corner on that one, because I believe that if a person attempts to overthrow the government, that is a war.
Well, here's the
So
more
this is a war.
Yeah.
What those two people did was engage in a war. Now
yeah.
they don't want to call it a war.
A lot of people in this country don't want to, but you and I agree on that. But here's the more compelling argument against the death sentence, and I thought you were going to throw this.
Oh, you're
at
going to
me.
give me something?
Oh, I'll
for
give you
myself?
better
Is there any
ammunition
charge
than
for
that. Oh,
Is there
absolutely.
charge for that?
No,
Okay.
this is a freebie. You know, that there is the possibility, and there has been.
Oh, wrong person.
Yeah, wrong person.
Oh,
so
happens
so,
every day.
You know, not every day.
Well, every week.
No, I don't know that it's
well,
every week,
5
but all it
times
has
a
to do, the argument goes,
I know.
all it has to do is be once. You kill one innocent person,
I know.
and you know, you say that there goes, you know,
Yeah.
there goes the rationale for the death penalty.
Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, that's a tough argument to fight. I happen to be in favor of the death penalty,
Yeah.
but I'm mindful of that, and I think with today's new forensics,
Yeah, they
and the
did that in Texas, didn't they? They found out that they had about 12 people who didn't do it,
well,
who
I
are
mean,
already in the grave.
But today, with the DNA testing,
Yeah.
and you know, the testing now is so much more definitive than it was.
Yeah.
I think the argument that you know, that you could get the wrong person is extremely limited now, based on the kind of evidence they use. And you know, then the other argument, and this is a good argument too. You know, the capital punishment doesn't really defer. It doesn't cause somebody else that might commit a crime. You know, it doesn't discourage them, or whatever the word is. You know, so why do it?
No, I really believe that's one of the things that's logical, that there are people who say, well, he knows now that it's a federal offense that he might be executed. These guys don't think of the penalty when they do these things. They don't think maybe I'll be executed, so they. Do you think those guys want to sit for the next? That young man's 19 years old. In my world, against capital punishment, he's liable to live until he's 90, 100 years old. He's good for 80 years in a prison. But here's where I differ when I say I'm going to be against capital punishment. I'm not for, and this is where they have problems with them, I'm not for paroling them, though. If
And
you've
they
got a
do very
guy,
often.
well, yes, they do, and I disagree with that. I think if you're going to take a guy or a girl that Swift goes, there's a girl up in New Hampshire. I think she's in for life in a day, because New Hampshire will do that to you. You know, and she's in a real bind now because she thought she was going to go home someday. Well, that's the type of punishment it has to be, but you may have to put them in solitary because they don't mix well.
Well,
with
let me give you two other arguments.
Yeah.
First of all, you know, the argument that it doesn't deter other people from committing such crimes.
Oh, I
My-
don't think it occurs to anybody. No.
Well, my argument is if it deters one person, one person.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know, that's the other way of
Yeah.
looking at.
Yeah, I know.
If just one person says,
Yeah.
"My gosh,
Yeah.
I could die for committing this crime,"
And
that's to me that's worth it.
I hear
But
you.
here's the other argument. You just mentioned that this brother, who will spend the next 70 years in prison at 70 grand a year.
Yep.
Do the math. That's $5 million. Can you think of one other thing we might use with $5 million? Can you
Well, I
think
could
of?
say that young
on.
lady that's being tried in Arizona, I think she's up to 3, and she hasn't even been
Yeah.
convicted.
Oh, we're not talking the trial. The trial is millions, which is another problem. We were, you know, I mean, it's like.
It's a funny world we live in. Isn't
Well,
it, though?
it's-
You haven't addressed my guy.
What?
I don't want
What's that?
I don't want to hire a man or a woman who normally is a prison guard. That's usually it. On that particular day, though, to inject someone to kill them. Is that something which you think is a person should have that
I'll
as
bet
a
you-
job on the job description? Oh, by the way.
Let me tell you this.
Okay.
I'll bet you if there was an ad put in the paper or the net asking for people who wanted the job to execute this individual.
Oh, I don't see it.
I think the line would be from here to Boston. I really do. I think you'd see people, you know what? There's a lot of people that are in favor of capital punishment and who have been outvoted by the people we've elected in spite of that, the majority feeling in that regard. So, yeah, I'll tell you right now, if
But
that was an ad
you
place,
do
you'd have people
understand-
standing in line.
You know better than I that we are one of about 5 nations that has capital punishment, and we don't want to get the names of the countries, North Korea, China. I think China's even maybe not doing it anymore. All of these countries that are dictatorships that people have no, in Korea, no, Vietnam, there was a guy that was giving us information, and he got arrested by the Vietnamese government. And so they called up the Vietnamese government. They said, my golly, that guy's all very valuable. And they said, well, what's his name? And they gave him the name. They said, well, when was he tried? They said, this morning. He said, well, he's gone. That's capital punishment. He convicted at 9 and he's dead at 10.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Save a lot of money.
well, yeah, but I'm just saying, I just don't believe we should be hiring people. You say that the line forms to the,
For the people that would
do it. That would do
Let
it.
me tell you something.
But that proves that
Yeah, let me tell you something.
kind of
That
animal
line
are we
would be
that-
people that were volunteering, and they wouldn't
Yeah.
even ask for money. But here's the other thing. Now, I was talking earlier with a person
With some.
whose father
Yeah.
works as a defense investigator,
Yeah.
investigator for the defense.
Right.
Now, this individual's going to have defense attorneys, and there's going to be a really, quite a bit of money spent, as we had just indicated, in his defense. Now, I ask you, when there is absolutely no doubt about the person's guilt, I mean, we're not talking 99%. If there was a 99% probability, that 1% would certainly be deserving of a solid defense. But when it's absolutely
100%,
clear,
yeah.
100%, no doubt that this person is guilty, he just come out of a shootout, I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
I know.
Why would we spend millions and millions of dollars on a defense? Will you explain this to me?
We do it anyway, though. If you
Civil
give
rights.
a guy, if
Civil
you give a
rights.
guy, you give him that he's going to be executed, it's an automatic appeal.
Yeah,
And
I'm
it
not even
goes-
talking about execution now. Put
Yeah.
that aside.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what the state law is. I'm just saying, we're going to spend scores of millions, tens of millions of dollars on this person's defense. Now, I realize that
Oh, look
the
at Whitey
rule
Bulger.
of-
Whitey Bulger.
Yeah, the rule of law,
Yeah.
and civil rights, I get it, and it's important.
Yeah.
But isn't there the pendulum never seems to settle at a balanced point. It's always one extreme or the other.
I know.
And you have to, common sense people have to ask, in spite of our
I just don't
concern
want to
about
hire
civil
people
rights.
to kill people. That's all. I
Oh,
just.
these people would volunteer, I'll tell
I
you right now.
understand it, but I
They're
don't.
not being hired.
I don't want to deal with those kind of people. Thank you very much. They're not coming out to my house for lunch. I can tell you that right now.
Well, I understand, but
But that's just my.
Yeah.
That's the reason for my opinion on it. And I think, by the way, when it comes to civil rights, I think it's more cruel for them to spend the
all the
next
time.
80 years
Yeah, but
in jail, in
it-
solitary
sure.
confinement, 23 hours in a little hole.
let me take that argument. First of all, put aside the $5 million
Yeah.
it's going to cost to keep this person there.
Yeah.
But you know what? After a few years in that lifestyle, you're fed, you're clothed, you've got heat, you've
Yeah.
got books.
Yeah.
They get degrees. They wind up getting law degrees, and then they challenge the system
I
with
know.
frivolous suits.
I know.
And you know what? I don't know that torture is quite as great, if I can use that word in
Yeah.
quotes, as you might like to think it is. They get a lifestyle. There have been many people who have been in prison for 20, 15 years, and they don't want to be let go. They say, I don't want to get out there.
That's right.
It's too crazy.
There
You know?
are people that go right back to jail. They come out of
Just
jail,
because
they put a boulder
So-
through the window, and they're back in jail.
Yeah, so you know what? I'm not happy with the fact that this guy is going to take $5 million of the state's money.
Yeah,
when I can think
well,
of
in
at
federal,
least.
in federal, he will be. I would, if I were guessing, he would be federal charges, and he will be executed.
Why don't we spend that $5 million on homeless kids or abused kids?
Well,
or-
that isn't the way the package works. You know that, and I know.
Well, I
that.
think it's a
That
better way to spend
know,
our money.
I
Right.
know.
Anyway, you didn't bite with my segue that I offered you, which was let's ban bombs. Which is not my line. But
Oh, because bombs are made in the kitchen with people.
you don't think you can make a gun?
if you
Yeah,
can make
but if
that. I don't think you can make that kind of gun the way you can make a bomb.
Well, a bomb is certainly more devastating. They just
I know, but I'm
drop
saying
200 people.
you can
with
make
one-
them. I just think a bomb is easy to make. So they say. Now, if you took Don McKinnon and you gave him a formula on making the bomb, the headline would read, "Local kitchen blows up. Former selectman was killed with his own bomb." No one knows why
That's
he was
happened
doing
many
it.
times, too,
Donnie
by the way,
McKinnon
with-
just decided to build a bomb. That's all. He had the instructions. Here it was, And but so no. But there are
That's
people.
a dangerous learning curve.
Wow, I just can't do those kind of things. But anyway, that's what
Well,
I
the
think.
only point I was trying to make,
Yeah.
Don, by being a little bit silly about it, but the point is this: we need the people who we elect to focus more on the true issue.
Yeah.
It's not assault rifles. It's people who have mental health problems. We've said it all along. Deal with the people, whether they're fundamentalist jihadists or whether they're mentally ill. Let's spend our money there and stop worrying about the instrument. Let's deal with the person who's using the
But
instrument.
see, I worry about a guy that thinks he needs an assault rifle.
What is an assault rifle, Don? We've had this discussion. Most people don't even understand it.
Well, it's multiple bullets leaving chamber in such an order that it's I call it a machine
It
gun.
isn't a machine gun.
Oh well.
It isn't.
Definition of a machine gun is
That's
what?
The definition of a machine gun is you pull the trigger once and it keeps shooting. An assault rifle is a semi-automatic rifle. You have to pull the trigger every time a round is fired. And so it's like every gun in the world except for old Western pistols, single action revolvers, is semi-automatic. I mean, now listen. One of the things with regard to the whole gun.
I know we're not going to get the guns away from you guys. I know that isn't going to happen, but at least we should have a record check on you.
I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
One of the arguments that I think is deserving is that the background check thing, which they're fighting for, is certainly worthwhile. But again, you have to worry about the slippery slope. Once you start the background checks, and that's what causes people to say, well, I don't want this, because you know what? Once you start digging into people's backgrounds, you can create more and more insidious rules that control what qualifies for a person. And that's the only danger. It's that once you open that door, can you draw the line? It's an argument you made very earlier. You started down that path, whether it's video surveillance, where do you draw the line?
I just know when I was in the service and I was an open book when I went into intelligence, they could ask any question about me and I would have no objection to it. It just seems to me a point that people shouldn't be concerned about record checks. I just don't think it's a big thing in their
we're
life.
not talking about record check. We're talking about, creating rules that say, hey, you can be very open, but you know what, Donald? Your age, your family background, your ethnicity, your beliefs, your political affiliations. I mean, there can be any number of ways in which I can limit, if I have that capability, your right to have an arm.
Do you now?
Carry
We're
it,
getting near the
Second
end. The
Amendment.
question would be: are you against record checks?
No,
Okay. Well, then you're for it.
I'm not for it. I'm not against it. No, I'm not against it.
No,
I'm not against it. No, I'm not against it. But you know what?
You make a great
let me-
argument against your argument.
But I'll tell you
That's
one
fine.
thing. I would much favor a leadership in this country that would not be so dogmatic on a narrow issue like gun control, and worried more about issues like our economy, worried more about issues like immigration, and not devote. What we have now is a very one-track kind of leadership where the focus is on one issue. And there is no other, that's it.
That's right. We do get off on.
Let me tell you a good indication of a good manager.
No, you're going to have to.
Is somebody that can juggle more than one thing, one issue. And what we have is a single-minded. I wanted to close by making a couple of comments.
Okay.
One, if I can find it, is that just for our viewers, and you made this mention before we went on air, but we have a slot power information
tomorrow
forum
night.
planned, and that's for
Wednesday
night at 6:30 p.m. And this is the group that we have hired to consultants to look at ways to mitigate the impact of a potential slot machine. So if those people that are interested.
And I would suggest that people come out there.
Yeah.
I originally wasn't thinking that much of it myself, and my wife said, you have an obligation to go out, and I said, I guess I do. I'm kind of retired.
Okay.
Kinda.
You have
But
the
anyway, I
closing-
will be there. Thank you all for watching. We have another 4 or 5 seconds, which we're owed.
Yeah.
So we thank you all for watching. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Great to be with you tonight. Have a great night, all of you. Great debate.
Right on
Love it.
right on the money.
Right.